In the vast tapestry of the galaxy, where 1,000 species bow to power and flee from death, there exists a peculiar anomaly. Humans, those strange, stubborn creatures from a backwater world, who possess an inexplicable tendency to do the exact opposite of what any rational being would do when faced with certain doom. They call it honor. Others call it madness. But when a universe's most feared assassins come calling, and an alien queen's own guards abandon her to save themselves, perhaps madness is exactly what the situation requires. This is the story of Sergeant Marcus Chun, a human soldier who made a choice that would echo across star systems and redefine what it means to keep one's word. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought for victory. They're fought for something far more valuable. Something that only humans seem foolish enough to die for. The plasma rifle felt heavy in Sergeant Marcus Chin's hands as he watched the last of Queen Zura's royal guards disappear into the emergency transport pods. The Vorthan Queen stood motionless beside her throne, her crystalline features reflecting the red emergency lights that bathed the royal chamber in an ominous glow. Outside, the thunderous roar of the Kethmori Death Fleet filled the air as their ships descended like metallic vultures upon the palace. Marcus had been assigned to the Vorthan Royal Guard only 3 months ago, part of a new human military exchange program designed to strengthen the alliance between Earth and the Vorthan Collective. The other guards had accepted him grudgingly at first, their towering, insectoid frames making his 6-foot human stature seem almost childlike. But he had proven himself capable, and they had grown to respect his tactical expertise and unwavering dedication to duty. Now, as the sound of their fleeing pods grew fainter, Marcus realized he was the only one left. Queen Zara turned to him slowly, her 6 arms moving with the fluid grace that characterized her species. Her large, multifaceted eyes held a mixture of resignation and curiosity as she regarded the human soldier. She had ruled the Vorthan Collective for over 2 centuries, had seen the rise and fall of dozens of species, had negotiated treaties, and commanded fleets. Yet she had never encountered anything quite like the expression on Marcus's face. "Why do you remain, human?" she asked, her voice carrying the melodic quality that all Vorthans possessed, even in the face of death. "Your contract has been fulfilled. My guards have fled to preserve their lives, as is logical and expected. You owe me nothing." Marcus adjusted his grip on his weapon and moved to position himself between the queen and the main entrance to the chamber. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, my contract stated that I would protect you with my life. It didn't include any clauses about evacuation procedures or escape contingencies." The queen's head tilted in that peculiar way Vorthans had when they encountered something beyond their understanding. "But you will die. The Kethmori do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They kill everyone in the royal bloodline, and anyone foolish enough to stand with them. This is known throughout the galaxy." "Yes, ma'am, I'm aware of their reputation," Marcus replied, checking the charge on his weapon. "But I gave you my word that I would protect you. Where I come from, that means something." A distant explosion shook the palace, sending delicate crystal ornaments crashing to the floor. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors outside, growing closer with each passing second. Marcus estimated they had perhaps 10 minutes before the Kethmori reached the throne room. Queen Zara moved closer to him, studying his face with intense curiosity. "Your species continues to baffle me, Sergeant Chun. In all my years, I have never seen beings so willing to sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts. Your people speak of honor, duty, loyalty as if they were tangible things worth dying for." "Maybe they are," Marcus said, not taking his eyes off the entrance. "Maybe that's what makes us human." The queen was silent for a moment, then spoke again, her voice softer now. "Tell me about your world, human. Tell me about the place that creates soldiers willing to die for alien queens they barely know." Marcus smiled grimly as he activated the chamber's defensive systems, raising energy barriers across the secondary entrances. "Earth isn't particularly special, Your Majesty. It's a blue and green ball of rock orbiting a medium-sized star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. We've got about 8 billion people, most of whom spend their time arguing with each other about everything imaginable." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered and several wall panels cracked. Marcus could hear the distinctive humming of Kethmori energy weapons powering up. But, he continued, moving to set up defensive positions behind the Queen's throne. We've got this thing about keeping our promises. My grandfather used to tell me that a man's word was the only thing that truly belonged to him, the only thing that couldn't be taken away by force or circumstance. I suppose that stuck with me. Queen Zara watched him work with growing fascination. Your grandfather was a warrior? Farmer. Actually, Marcus replied, placing explosive charges at strategic points around the room. But he fought in the resource wars when he was young. Lost his left arm defending a refugee camp from raiders. When I asked him why he didn't retreat when he was outnumbered, he just said that those people were counting on him. Simple as that. The sound of energy weapons grew louder. Marcus could make out individual voices now, harsh and guttural in the Kethmori language. They were discussing the best way to breach the throne room's defenses. Simple, the Queen repeated thoughtfully. Yes, humans do seem to view complex moral situations in remarkably straightforward terms. It should make you weak, this rigid adherence to principle. Yet your species has survived and thrived despite being physically inferior to most spacefaring races. Marcus finished his preparations and took position beside the throne, using its massive bulk as cover. Maybe strength isn't just about having bigger muscles or better weapons, Your Majesty. Maybe it's about being willing to do what's right even when it's hard. A brilliant flash of light filled the chamber as the Kethmori began cutting through the main doors with plasma torches. The acrid smell of superheated metal filled the air. Marcus estimated they had perhaps 3 minutes before the doors gave way. Queen Zara moved to stand beside him, her posture straight and dignified despite the approaching doom. Sergeant Shun, I want you to know that in my 2 centuries of life, I have never been more honored by someone's service. Your willingness to die for me, a being not of your species, in defense of principles your own kind holds sacred, it is perhaps the most remarkable thing I have ever witnessed. Marcus looked at her and nodded respectfully. It's been an honor serving you, Your Majesty. I just hope I can give you a clean death when the time comes. The Kethmori aren't known for their mercy. No, she said quietly, they are not. But perhaps that is why the universe needs beings like you, Sergeant. Perhaps that is why humans exist at all. The cutting stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence, except for the hum of the palace's emergency power systems. Then, the doors exploded inward in a shower of molten metal and superheated plasma. Dark shapes poured through the smoke, their weapons already firing. Marcus opened fire immediately, his plasma rifle spitting bolts of coherent energy into the advancing Kethmori warriors. The aliens were massive, easily 8 feet tall, with thick, armored hides and multiple arms wielding various weapons. Their red eyes glowed in the darkness as they spread out to surround the throne. Get down! Marcus shouted to the Queen, diving to cover her, as return fire scorched the air where they had been standing. His shots were precise and deadly, dropping 3 Kethmori in the first few seconds of the firefight. But there were dozens of them, and more pouring through the breach every second. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around, and sending him crashing into one of the crystal pillars that supported the throne room's ceiling. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to keep firing. Another alien fell, then another. Queen Zara had taken cover behind her throne, but she was watching Marcus with those multifaceted eyes, seeing something in his actions that transcended mere duty or training. This human was fighting not just to protect her life, but to uphold something intangible yet vitally important to his species. Marcus rolled to new cover as the aliens concentrated their fire on his position. His rifle's charge indicator showed he was running low on power. At this rate, he might last another minute or 2 at most. But every second he bought was another second that Queen Zara remained alive, another second that his word remained unbroken. One of the Kethmori warriors, larger than the others and bearing the distinctive scarification of a battle leader, stepped forward and spoke in heavily accented galactic standard. Human, you fight well for an inferior species. Surrender now, and we will grant you a warrior's death. Continue to resist, and we will make your ending slow and painful. Marcus popped up from cover and put a plasma bolt through the warrior's center mass, sending him toppling backward into his companions. "Thanks for the offer," he called out, ducking back as return fire chewed up the pillar above his head. "But I'll have to pass." The battle leader's death seemed to enrage the remaining Kethmori. They pressed their attack with renewed fury, advancing despite the deadly accuracy of Marcus's shots. His rifle finally ran dry just as he dropped the last alien in the first wave, but more were already pouring through the breach. Drawing his sidearm, Marcus continued to fight, each shot carefully aimed and precisely placed. But the numbers were overwhelming. For every alien he brought down, 2 more took its place. His left arm hung useless at his side, plasma burns covered his body, and blood ran freely from a dozen wounds. As his pistol clicked empty, Marcus looked over at Queen Zara, who was still watching him with that expression of wonder and growing understanding. "Your Majesty," he said, breathing heavily, "it's been the greatest honor of my life to serve you." The queen nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting something that might have been tears if Vorthens had possessed tear ducts. "And you've shown me what it truly means to be human, Sergeant Chun. I will carry that knowledge with me into whatever comes next." Marcus drew his combat knife, the last weapon he had left, and prepared to make his final stand. The Kethmori were advancing more cautiously now, having learned to respect the humans' deadly accuracy. They formed a semicircle around the throne, their weapons trained on the bleeding soldier who stood between them and their target. But as the aliens prepared to finish him, something unexpected happened. The lights in the throne room suddenly blazed to full brightness, and a new voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in perfect Kethmori. It was Queen Zara, and she was no longer hiding behind her throne. She stood tall and regal, all 6 of her arms spread wide in a gesture that Marcus didn't recognize, but that caused the Kethmori warriors to hesitate. When she spoke, her words carried an authority that seemed to fill the entire room. "Warriors of the Kethmori," she said, her melodic voice somehow carrying over the sounds of battle. "I am Queen Zura of the Vorthen Collective, and I offer you a choice. You may kill us both and complete your mission as planned. But first, you will witness something that has never been seen in this galaxy before today." The aliens muttered among themselves, clearly confused by this unexpected development. Their leader, a scarred veteran with cybernetic implants replacing his left eye, stepped forward. "What trickery is this, Vorthen? You seek to delay your death." Queen Zara shook her head slowly. "No trique, no delay. I simply want you to understand what you are about to destroy. This human, this Sergeant Marcus Chun, has done something unprecedented in galactic history. He has chosen to die for a being not of his species, for principles that offer him no material reward, simply because he gave his word that he would do so." She moved to stand beside Marcus, who was swaying on his feet, but still gripping his knife with determined resolve. "In all my centuries of life, through all the wars and conquests and political maneuverings I have witnessed, I have never seen such purity of purpose. This human represents something new in our galaxy, something we have never encountered before." The Kethmori leader's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Marcus, analyzing and cataloging every detail. Humans are weak. Their bodies break easily. Their lifespans are brief. What makes this one significant? Queen Zara's reply came without hesitation. Because he chose to stay when everyone else ran. Because he chose to fight when victory was impossible. Because he chose to honor his word when breaking it would have saved his life. That, warriors of the Kethmori, is what makes him significant. The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle elsewhere in the palace. Marcus could feel the strength leaving his body, could see the edges of his vision beginning to blur. But he remained standing, his knife ready, his word unbroken. And in that moment, as alien warriors contemplated the strange courage of a dying human soldier, something shifted in the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be brave. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could feel his blood pooling beneath his feet, his vision swimming in and out of focus as shock and blood loss took their toll. Yet somehow, he remained upright, his knife steady in his hand. The Kethmori warriors stood frozen, their weapons still trained on him, but something in their posture had changed. The scarred leader tilted his massive head, studying Marcus with his good eye and the mechanical replacement alike. When he spoke, his voice carried a note that Marcus had never heard from a Kethmori before, something that might have been respect. Human, the warrior said slowly, I am War Chief Kronak of the 3rd Assault Fleet. I have killed beings from 100 worlds. I have seen courage and cowardice in equal measure across the stars. But never have I seen one stand so firm in the face of certain death for the sake of another species. Marcus tried to respond, but only managed a weak cough that brought blood to his lips. Still, he didn't lower his weapon. War Chief Kronak turned to address Queen Zara, though his cybernetic eye remained fixed on Marcus. Vorthan Queen, your words have truth in them. This human fights not for conquest or survival, but for something far more dangerous to our understanding of the universe. Dangerous? Queen Zara asked, moving slightly closer to Marcus, as if her proximity could somehow transfer strength to the failing human soldier. Yes, Kronak replied, his scarred features twisting into what might have been confusion or fear. He fights for principle, for abstract concepts that have no material value. This is not how sentient beings behave. We fight for territory, for resources, for the survival of our genetic lines. We do not die for the promises we make to aliens. One of the younger Kethmori warriors shifted nervously, his weapon wavering slightly. War Chief, the human bleeds. He cannot stand much longer. Should we not finish this? Kronak held up one massive hand, silencing his subordinate without taking his eyes off Marcus. Tell me, human, why do you not beg for mercy? Why do you not offer us information about Vorthan defenses in exchange for your life? Your death serves no strategic purpose. Your sacrifice will not save your queen. Why do you persist? Marcus managed to straighten slightly, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he still possessed. When he spoke, his voice was weak but clear. Because I said I would protect her. Because my word is all I have that's truly mine. Because someone has to make a stand, even if it doesn't change anything. The War Chief's cybernetic eye whirred as it processed this response. Around the throne room, other Kethmori warriors exchanged glances, their usual certainty shaken by this encounter with human resolve. Your word, Kronak repeated slowly. You speak of it as if it were a physical thing, something that could be lost or damaged. Maybe it can be, Marcus said, swaying slightly but keeping his grip on the knife. Maybe when you break your word, you lose a piece of yourself. Maybe that's why humans fight so hard to keep their promises. Maybe that's why we can't just walk away when things get difficult. Queen Zara watched this exchange with growing amazement. She had studied human psychology extensively when the military exchange program began, but nothing in her research had prepared her for this moment. The dying soldier beside her was teaching these alien warriors something fundamental about the human condition, something that couldn't be found in any textbook or cultural analysis. Another explosion rocked the palace, closer than before. The sound of energy weapons and shouting voices echoed through the corridors as other Kethmori squads completed their systematic extermination of the royal household. Yet the warriors in the throne room remained motionless, trapped in a moment that none of them fully understood. War Chief, one of the older warriors, said quietly, the other squads report their missions complete. They await our confirmation of the Queen's termination. Kronak's mechanical eye focused on the warrior who had spoken. Tell them to maintain their positions. This matter requires further consideration. Marcus felt his legs beginning to give way. The knife in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and the room was starting to spin around him. But even as his body failed, his resolve remained unshaken. He had made a promise, and he would keep it until his last breath. Queen Zara moved to support him, her multiple arms helping to keep him upright. Sergeant Shun, you have already done more than anyone could ask. You have proven your point. Your species' honor is intact. Marcus looked at her with eyes that were struggling to focus. Not finished yet, Your Majesty. Still breathing, still standing. Promise still good. The simple declaration seemed to hit the assembled Kethmori like a physical blow. Several of them actually stepped back, their weapons lowering unconsciously. War Chief Kronak stared at Marcus for a long moment, then slowly began to remove his battle helmet. Beneath the scarred metal and ceramic composite was a face that bore the marks of countless battles. Scars, burn marks, and the silvery traces of surgical repairs where flesh had been replaced with synthetic materials. But it was the expression on that face that surprised everyone in the room. It was wonder, pure and simple. In 60 years of warfare, Kronak said quietly, I have never seen anything like this. This human defies every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine, every rational response to an impossible situation. He should surrender. He should flee. He should bargain for his life. Instead, he stands here and bleeds and speaks of keeping promises to alien queens. He moved closer to Marcus, studying him with the intensity of someone examining a completely new form of life. Human, answer me this. What does your species gain from this behavior? How does this tendency to honor abstract commitments serve your evolutionary interests? Marcus managed a weak smile. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe some things are worth doing even if they don't benefit us directly. The war chief's remaining natural eye widened slightly. You speak of actions that serve no survival purpose? This is not possible. All behavior must serve some biological imperative. Must it? Queen Zara interjected, her voice thoughtful. War Chief Kronak, consider this. What if the human capacity for self-sacrifice in service of abstract principles is itself an evolutionary advantage? What if their willingness to die for their promises makes them more trustworthy allies, more dependable partners, more effective as a species? Kronak turned his attention to the Queen, his expression shifting from wonder to deep concentration. You suggest that human irrationality is actually a form of sophisticated reasoning. I suggest, Queen Zara replied, that what we call irrational may simply be rational on a scale we don't understand. Sergeant Chin's willingness to die for his word may seem pointless to us, but it demonstrates something that makes humans uniquely valuable in the galaxy: absolute reliability in their commitments. Another warrior, younger than the others and bearing fewer scars, stepped forward hesitantly. War Chief, if what the Queen says is true, then humans represent a new form of warfare. They cannot be broken by conventional means because they do not respond to conventional motivations. Kronak nodded slowly. Yes, Warrior Vex. A species that fights for abstract principles cannot be defeated by destroying their cities or killing their leaders. They will continue to resist as long as their principles remain intact. Marcus was barely conscious now, held upright only by Queen Zara's supporting arms and his own stubborn refusal to fall. But he was still listening, still aware of the conversation taking place around him. Through the haze of pain and blood loss, he began to understand that something significant was happening here, something that went beyond his own personal promise to protect the Queen. War Chief Kronak holstered his weapon and approached Marcus directly. When he was close enough to touch the dying human, he stopped and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire throne room. Sergeant Marcus Chun of the Human Military Forces, he said formally, I am War Chief Kronak of the Kethmori 3rd Assault Fleet. I have come here to kill Queen Zara and in the Vorthan royal bloodline. This mission was assigned to me by the high command of our people. Marcus tried to focus on the War Chief's face, his hand tightening reflexively on his knife. Then, you'll have to go through me. No, Kronak said quietly. I will not. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Every warrior in the room turned to stare at their leader, disbelief evident on their faces. Queen Zara's grip on Marcus tightened as she processed the implications of what she had just heard. War Chief, one of the warriors ventured uncertainly. Kronak turned to address his troops, his voice carrying the absolute authority that had made him one of the most feared commanders in the Kethmori fleet. Warriors, we have encountered something here that changes our understanding of warfare itself. This human has shown us that there are forms of strength that cannot be overcome by superior firepower or tactical advantage. He gestured toward Marcus, who was still standing despite his injuries. Look at him. He is defeated in every measurable way. His weapons are spent, his body is failing, his position is hopeless. Yet he has not surrendered. He continues to fight not because he believes he can win, but because he gave his word that he would do so. The war chief paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. This is not mere stubbornness or tactical error. This is something we have never encountered before in our campaigns across the galaxy. This is the willingness to choose death over dishonor, to value abstract principles above personal survival. Warrior Vex stepped forward, his young face creased with confusion. War Chief, what are you saying? Are we to abandon our mission because of one dying human? Kronak's reply was immediate and definitive. No, Warrior. We are to reconsider our mission because of what this dying human represents. The Kethmori have always prided themselves on being the ultimate warriors, the perfect soldiers, the apex predators of the galaxy. But this human has shown us that we have been measuring strength by the wrong standards. He moved to stand directly in front of Marcus, looking down at the swaying figure with something approaching reverence. We measure strength by the size of our fleets, the power of our weapons, the number of worlds we have conquered. But this human measures strength by his willingness to keep his promises. And in this moment, in this place, his strength is greater than ours. Marcus looked up at the towering alien warrior, his vision clearing slightly as adrenaline provided one last surge of clarity. War Chief Kronak, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you saying you're going to spare Queen Zara? Kronak nodded slowly. I'm saying more than that, human. I am saying that you have taught me something about the nature of true strength. The Kethmori have spent centuries conquering worlds and eliminating enemies, but we have never created anything worth dying for. We have never inspired the kind of loyalty that would make someone stand against impossible odds simply because they gave their word. The war chief turned to address Queen Zara directly. Vorthan Queen, your human guardian has earned something that has never been granted in the history of our campaigns. He has earned our respect, and with it, he has earned your life. Queen Zara stared at Kronak in shock. You're sparing me because Sergeant Shin impressed you? I am sparing you, Kronak corrected, because Sergeant Shin has shown me that there are some things more important than completing missions. His willingness to die for his word demonstrates a form of strength that makes our usual methods of warfare seem primitive and brutal. Marcus felt his legs finally give way, and he sank to his knees despite Queen Zara's attempts to hold him up. But even as his body failed, his spirit soared with the knowledge that his sacrifice had meant something after all. His promise had been kept, and the Queen would live. Sergeant, Queen Zara said urgently, kneeling beside him, you need medical attention immediately. Your wounds are severe. Marcus managed to smile up at her, his eyes bright with satisfaction despite his pale features. Did it, Your Majesty. Kept my word. Kept you safe. War Chief Kronak knelt on Marcus's other side, his massive frame dwarfing the injured human. Sergeant Shun, you have accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. You have changed the mind of a Kethmori war chief through the strength of your convictions alone. Marcus looked at the alien commander with surprise. Not trying to change anyone's mind, sir. Just trying to do my job. And that, Kronak said quietly, is exactly what makes you and your species so remarkable. You do not fight for glory or recognition. You fight because you believe it is right, even when no one is watching, even when no one will remember. The war chief stood and turned to address his warriors. This mission is complete, but not in the way our commanders expected. We came here to eliminate a threat to Kethmori expansion. Instead, we have discovered a greater truth. That true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the willingness to sacrifice for one's principles. He activated his communication device and spoke in rapid Kethmori to someone on the other end of the connection. When he finished, he looked down at Marcus with an expression that might have been gratitude. Sergeant, I have summoned our medical team to tend to your wounds. It would be a tragedy to let such courage die from something as mundane as blood loss. The medical bay aboard the Kethmori flagship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Biomechanical tentacles extended from the walls, scanning his injuries with pulses of soft blue light, while automated surgical instruments worked to repair the damage his body had sustained. The technology was far beyond anything in the human medical arsenal, yet it worked with a precision and efficiency that was both fascinating and slightly unsettling. Marcus floated in a regeneration tank filled with a viscous, amber-colored fluid that accelerated cellular repair while keeping him conscious and alert. Through the transparent walls of the tank, he could see War Chief Kronak standing at attention beside Queen Zara, both of them watching the medical procedures with intense interest. The neural pathway damage is minimal, reported the chief medical technician, a Kethmori with extensive cybernetic modifications that replaced most of his upper torso. The plasma burns are severe, but treatable. The human's bone density is surprisingly high for such a small frame. His body shows evidence of previous combat injuries that healed well. War Chief Kronak nodded approvingly. How long until he is fully recovered? Approximately 18 standard hours for complete cellular regeneration, the technician replied. However, the psychological trauma of expecting death followed by unexpected survival may require additional time to process. Queen Zara moved closer to the tank, placing one of her hands against the transparent surface. Sergeant Shun, can you hear me clearly? Marcus tried to speak, but the breathing apparatus in his mouth made vocal communication impossible. Instead, he raised one hand and gave her a thumbs-up gesture that had become universally recognized as a sign of approval among spacefaring species. Good, the Queen continued. I want you to know that what happened in the throne room has already begun to spread throughout the galaxy. Within hours of War Chief Kronak's report to his superiors, news of your stand had reached the highest levels of both Kethmori and Vorthan command structures. Kronak stepped forward, his scarred features creased with something that might have been concern. Sergeant, there is something you must understand. What you did today was not merely an act of personal heroism. It has created political ramifications that will echo across multiple star systems. The War Chief activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of various fleets throughout the sector. Marcus could see Kethmori vessels withdrawing from Vorthan space, while diplomatic ships from numerous species converged on neutral meeting points. The Kethmori High Command has called for an immediate ceasefire, Kronak explained. Not because we fear human military might. Your species still represents a tiny fraction of galactic military power. But because your actions have demonstrated something that we cannot counter with conventional warfare. Marcus raised his hand questioningly, and Queen Zara seemed to understand his confusion. You want to know what you mean, War Chief? Remember, humans are still relatively new to galactic politics. They don't fully understand the implications of their own behavior. Kronak's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Marcus. Sergeant, the Kethmori have built their empire on a simple principle, that all sentient beings will choose survival over principle when faced with certain death. This understanding has allowed us to predict enemy behavior, break their morale, and achieve victory through psychological warfare as much as superior firepower. The War Chief paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. Your species violates this fundamental assumption. You choose principle over survival. You honor commitments even when those commitments serve no tactical purpose. This makes you unpredictable in ways that render our traditional strategies ineffective. A new voice entered the conversation as Admiral Thakes, the commander of the Kethmori Third Fleet, materialized as a holographic projection beside the medical tank. His appearance was even more intimidating than Kronak's, with extensive cybernetic replacements that included both eyes and most of his jaw. Sergeant Shun, the Admiral began without preamble. Your actions today have forced the Kethmori Empire to reconsider our expansion policies throughout this sector. War Chief Kronak's report describes behavior that our strategic analysts deemed impossible until now. Marcus tried to gesture that he didn't understand the significance of what he had done, but the Admiral continued before he could complete the movement. For 3 centuries, the Kethmori have expanded through the galaxy by identifying the pressure points of enemy civilizations. We determine what each species values most, their homeworld, their culture, their genetic heritage, and threaten those things to achieve compliance. This strategy has never failed. Admiral Thakes leaned closer to the holographic projector, his mechanical eyes glowing with an eerie light. But humans appear to value abstract concepts more than their own lives. This makes traditional pressure tactics not only ineffective, but counterproductive. Threatening humans with death only strengthens their resolve to honor their commitments. Queen Zara moved to where she could address both the Admiral and Marcus simultaneously. What Admiral Thakes is explaining, Sergeant, is that your species has inadvertently created a new form of deterrence. Nations and empires that include humans in their military or diplomatic corps become significantly more difficult to defeat because human personnel cannot be counted upon to behave rationally when threatened. The implications of this revelation began to dawn on Marcus as the regeneration process continued its work on his damaged body. Humans weren't valuable because of their technology or their numbers or their strategic resources. They were valuable because their willingness to die for their principles made them impossible to intimidate or coerce. War Chief Kronak activated another display, this one showing communication logs from the past several hours. Already, we are receiving reports from other sectors where human personnel have exhibited similar behavior. A human diplomat who refused to break confidentiality even under torture. A human engineer who died rather than sabotage safety systems that protected civilians. A human merchant who honored a contract despite it bankrupting his company. Each incident by itself seemed like an isolated case of stubborn irrationality, Admiral Fakes added. But, taken together, they represent a pattern that we can no longer ignore. Humans consistently choose principle over self-preservation, and this choice makes them extremely valuable as allies and extremely dangerous as enemies. The medical technician announced that the first phase of treatment was complete, and Marcus felt the breathing apparatus being withdrawn from his mouth. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke, but his words were clear. With all due respect, Admiral, I think you're overthinking this. I didn't stay to protect Queen Zara because of some grand human philosophy. I stayed because I gave my word, and where I come from, you don't break your word just because things get dangerous. Admiral Fakes' mechanical jaw clicked as he processed this response. Sergeant, do you not understand what you have just said? You have confirmed that humans will honor their commitments regardless of personal cost. This makes your species uniquely trustworthy in a galaxy where betrayal and self-interest dominate most interactions. Queen Zara moved to the control panel of the medical tank and began adjusting settings that would allow for more direct communication. Marcus, what the Admiral is trying to explain is that trust is the most valuable commodity in galactic politics. Treaties, alliances, and trade agreements are only as strong as the reliability of the parties involved. She paused, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the amber light from the regeneration tank. Most species honor their agreements only as long as those agreements serve their interests. When circumstances change, they find ways to renegotiate or withdraw. But humans appear to honor agreements simply because they made them, regardless of changing circumstances. Marcus floated in the healing fluid, trying to process the idea that his simple refusal to abandon his duty had somehow become a matter of interstellar politics. Your Majesty, I'm just a soldier. I'm not a diplomat or a politician. I don't know anything about galactic strategy. That, War Chief Kronak interjected, is exactly what makes you and your species so remarkable. You act on principle without calculating the political implications. This authenticity is something that cannot be faked or manufactured. The war chief moved closer to the tank, his expression serious. Sergeant, I must ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer with complete honesty. If you were given another assignment to protect an alien dignitary, and that assignment led to a similar situation where you face certain death, would you stay and fight again? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. That's what the job means. You protect the people you're assigned to protect. Everything else is just details. A long silence followed this statement. Admiral Fakes and War Chief Kronak exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their shared understanding of the implications. Queen Zara simply stared at Marcus with an expression of wonder that had only grown stronger since their encounter in the throne room. Finally, Admiral Fakes spoke again. War Chief Kronak, transmit my orders to all fleet commanders. The campaign against the Vorthan Collective is hereby suspended pending further strategic analysis. All units are to return to defensive positions immediately. He turned to address Queen Zara directly. Your Majesty, the Kethmori Empire wishes to open formal negotiations for a peace treaty. We believe that continued conflict serves neither of our people's interests. Queen Zara's response was immediate and gracious. Admiral Fakes, the Vorthan Collective has always preferred diplomacy to warfare. We would be honored to discuss terms for lasting peace between our peoples. But it was War Chief Kronak who spoke next, and his words surprised everyone in the medical bay. There is one additional element to our proposal, Your Majesty. The Kethmori Empire would like to formally request that human military advisors be included in our future peace negotiations. We believe their presence would ensure that all parties honor their commitments fully. Marcus tried to sit up in the regeneration tank, causing several monitoring devices to emit warning sounds. Wait, you want humans involved in your peace talks? More than involved, Admiral Fakes clarified. We want humans to serve as guarantors of the agreement. Your species' reputation for honoring commitments would make any treaty much more stable and long-lasting. Queen Zara nodded thoughtfully. It's an interesting proposal. Having humans serve as neutral arbitrators could indeed strengthen any agreement we reach. But, she continued, looking directly at Marcus, such an arrangement would require humans to be willing to enforce treaty violations, even if enforcement meant conflict with vastly superior military forces. Are you confident your species would accept such responsibilities? Marcus thought about this for a moment, considering what he knew about human history and human nature. Your Majesty, humans have been keeping promises to each other for thousands of years, usually without any hope of personal benefit. I don't see why promising to help alien species keep their agreements would be any different. War Chief Kronak made a sound that Marcus gradually realized was Kethmori laughter. Sergeant Chun, you have just agreed to potentially make your species the galaxy's peacekeepers, and you speak of it as if it were a routine assignment. Maybe it is, Marcus replied. Maybe that's what humans are supposed to do in the galaxy. Maybe that's why we're here. The conversation was interrupted by the medical technician announcing that the next phase of treatment was ready to begin. But, as Marcus settled back into the healing embrace of the regeneration tank, he couldn't shake the feeling that his simple decision to keep his word had somehow changed the course of galactic history. Outside the medical bay, Admiral Fakes and War Chief Kronak stood in private consultation, their voices too low for Marcus to hear. But Queen Zara remained beside the tank, her expression thoughtful as she contemplated the implications of what she had witnessed. Sergeant Chun, she said quietly, I want you to understand something. What you did today was not just about protecting one Vorthan queen. You have potentially changed the way entire civilizations interact with each other. Marcus managed a weak smile. Your Majesty, I think you're giving me way too much credit. All I did was my job. Yes, Queen Zara replied, her voice filled with something approaching awe. That's exactly what makes it so extraordinary. 6 months after the incident in Queen Zara's throne room, Marcus Chun stood in the observation deck of the neutral space station Concordia Prime, watching as representatives from 37 different species arrive for what historians were already calling the most significant diplomatic gathering in galactic history. The sight was breathtaking. Ships of every conceivable design converging on a massive station that hung in the void between star systems like a glittering jewel against the black of space. Marcus wore a new uniform now, one that bore no national or planetary insignia. Instead, his chest displayed the simple emblem of the newly formed Galactic Arbitration Corps, a circle containing representations of various species' symbols arranged around a central star. He was no longer Sergeant Marcus Chun of Earth's military forces. He was now Chief Arbitrator Chun, the first human to hold such a position in an organization that existed because of what had happened in a Vorthan throne room 6 months ago. Nervous? Asked Captain Sarah Winters, another human who had been recruited into the fledgling arbitration service. She stood beside him at the observation window, her own uniform bearing the rank insignia of a senior mediator. Marcus considered the question seriously. Honestly, terrified. 6 months ago, I was just trying to do my job protecting one alien queen. Now apparently I'm supposed to help keep peace between dozens of species I'd never even heard of. Captain Winters laughed, a sound that drew curious glances from the other beings in the observation lounge. Marcus, you do realize that half the species out there requested human arbitrators specifically because of what you did, right? The Kethmori have been spreading the story of your last stand throughout their empire. They're calling it the day a human taught warriors the meaning of strength. Through the massive viewport, Marcus could see a Kethmori dreadnought taking position alongside Vorthan diplomatic vessels, former enemies now working together to establish the framework for lasting peace. It was a sight that would have been impossible without the events that had unfolded in Queen Zara's palace. Chief Arbitrator Chun, a melodic voice said behind them, "Might I have a word?" Marcus turned to find Queen Zara approaching, her 6 arms moving with the graceful precision that characterized her species. She wore formal diplomatic robes, now rather than her royal regalia, but her bearing remained unmistakably regal. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, offering the respectful bow that had become standard protocol in human-Vorthan interactions. "It's good to see you again. The pleasure is mine, Chief Arbitrator. And please, in your new capacity as neutral mediator, you may simply call me Ambassador Zara. I represent the Vorthan collective in these proceedings, but I am here as an equal participant, not as royalty." Captain Winters excused herself diplomatically, leaving Marcus and the former queen to speak privately. They moved to a quieter section of the observation deck, where their conversation wouldn't be overheard by the various diplomatic personnel who filled the space. "Marcus," Zara began, using his first name with the familiarity that had developed between them over the past months. "I wanted to speak with you before the formal sessions begin. There are things you should know about what your actions have set in motion." Marcus nodded, gesturing for her to continue. Over the past 6 months, he had received numerous briefings about the political changes sweeping through the galaxy, but he suspected that Zara's perspective would offer insights that the official reports had missed. "The Kethmori weren't exaggerating when they said you had taught them about strength," she began. "War Chief Kronak has become something of a philosopher among his people. He's written extensively about what he calls the human paradox, the idea that true power comes from the willingness to sacrifice power for principle." She moved closer to the viewport, watching as more ships arrived. "But the changes go far deeper than military philosophy. Species throughout this sector have begun re-evaluating their own cultural values in light of human behavior. The concept of absolute commitment to one's word is spreading through diplomatic channels like wildfire." Marcus frowned thoughtfully. "Is that a good thing? I mean, not every situation calls for absolute commitment. Sometimes flexibility and compromise are more important than rigid adherence to principle." "An excellent observation," Zara replied, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight from outside. "Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you privately. Some species are attempting to emulate human behavior without truly understanding it. They see your willingness to die for your word as a tactical advantage rather than a moral imperative." She turned to face him directly, her expression serious. "The Thraxian Confederacy, for example, has begun training their diplomats to make exaggerated displays of commitment to their positions, hoping to gain negotiating advantages by appearing human-like in their dedication. They don't understand that genuine human resolve cannot be manufactured or performed." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he grasped the implications. "You're saying that some species are trying to fake human behavior to manipulate others?" "Exactly. And, worse, some are interpreting human commitment as a form of dangerous fanaticism. There are factions within the Deltarian Republic that argue humans are too unpredictable to be trusted with arbitration duties. They claim that a species willing to die for abstract principles might be equally willing to kill for them." The observation deck had grown quieter as more diplomatic personnel departed for the formal preparation sessions. Marcus and Zara found themselves increasingly alone as they continued their conversation. "Ambassador," Marcus said carefully, "are you suggesting that the arbitration program is in danger before it even begins?" "I'm suggesting that the galaxy is watching to see whether humans can apply their famous principles fairly and consistently, especially when those principles conflict with human interests," Zara replied. "The first major case you arbitrate will set precedents that affect human credibility for decades to come." As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Fakes materialized beside them as a holographic projection, his cybernetic features as intimidating as ever despite the formal diplomatic setting. "Chief Arbitrator Chun, Ambassador Zara," he said with the precise courtesy that had become standard in Kethmori diplomatic interactions. "I hope I am not interrupting an important discussion." "Not at all, Admiral," Marcus replied. "In fact, your timing is perfect." Ambassador Zara was just explaining some of the challenges facing the arbitration program. Admiral Fakes' mechanical eyes focused on Marcus with their characteristic intensity. "Indeed. Which is why I wanted to speak with you before the opening ceremonies begin. The first case to be brought before the arbitration panel involves a disputed territory claim between the Kethmori Empire and the Human Colonial Authority." Marcus felt his stomach drop. A dispute between humans and Kethmori? Admiral, that puts me in an impossible position. How can I arbitrate fairly between my own species and yours? That, Admiral Fake said with what Marcus had learned to recognize as approval, is exactly why we specifically requested you for this case. A less principled arbitrator might be tempted to favor their own species or to overcompensate by favoring ours. But your track record suggests that you will make your decision based solely on the merits of the case. Ambassador Zara moved to stand between Marcus and the Admiral's projection. Admiral Fakes, with respect, that places an enormous burden on Chief Arbitrator Chun. If he rules against human interests, his own species may question his loyalty. If he rules against Kethmori interests, it could undermine the entire arbitration process. Precisely, Admiral Fakes replied, which is why this case is perfect for establishing the credibility of human arbitrators. If Chief Arbitrator Chun can make a fair ruling when his own species' interests are at stake, it will demonstrate that humans can indeed serve as neutral mediators. Marcus took a deep breath, tried to process the weight of what was being placed on his shoulders. Admiral, what exactly is the nature of this territorial dispute? The Kepler 442 system, Admiral Fakes explained, activating a holographic display that showed star charts and colonization records. Both human and Kethmori forces arrived at the system simultaneously 18 months ago. The humans claim prior exploration rights based on automated probe data. The Kethmori claim settlement rights based on the first establishment of permanent infrastructure. The display zoomed in to show a habitable planet surrounded by orbital installations from both civilizations. The system contains rare mineral resources that both species need for their expansion efforts. Neither side is willing to withdraw their claims, and both have significant military assets in the region. Ambassador Zara studied the data with obvious concern. This could easily escalate into armed conflict if not resolved soon. Which is why, Admiral Fakes continued, both sides agreed to submit the matter to arbitration rather than risk a war that would benefit neither party. But the arbitrator must be someone whom both humans and Kethmori trust completely. Marcus stared at the holographic display, his mind racing through the implications. Admiral, you realize that this case could determine whether humans are seen as capable of putting justice above loyalty to their own species. Yes, Admiral Fakes replied simply. And, more importantly, it will determine whether the arbitration system can function at all. If this first major case fails, the entire concept of neutral human arbitrators will be discredited. The observation deck had become almost empty now, with only a few maintenance personnel remaining to prepare for the evening's formal ceremonies. Marcus, Ambassador Zura, and Admiral Fakes' projection were essentially alone with the weight of galactic politics resting on their conversation. Chief Arbitrator, Ambassador Zura said quietly, there's something else you should know about this case. Earth's government has already issued unofficial statements supporting the human colonial claims. Your own species expects you to rule in their favor. Marcus felt a familiar sensation in his stomach, the same feeling he had experienced when facing the Kethmori warriors in the throne room. The knowledge that he was being asked to make a choice that would define not just his own character, but the character of his entire species. Admiral Fakes, Ambassador Zura, he said finally, I need to ask you both a direct question. Do you believe I can arbitrate this case fairly? Not just as a human, but as someone who is literally willing to die rather than break his word to a Vorthan queen. Admiral Fakes' mechanical jaw clicked once before he responded. Chief Arbitrator Chun, the fact that you are asking that question is exactly why we believe you are the right person for this responsibility. Ambassador Zara nodded in agreement. Marcus, 6 months ago you proved that you could put your duty above your own life. Now you have the opportunity to prove that you can put justice above loyalty to your own species. I cannot think of a better test of human integrity. Marcus looked out at the assembled ships, each representing millions or billions of beings whose futures would be affected by the decisions made aboard this station. He thought about his grandfather's words about a man's promise being the only thing that truly belonged to him. But now he was being asked to expand that concept to encompass something much larger. The idea that justice itself was a promise that had to be kept, regardless of personal or species loyalty. Admiral, Ambassador, he said, his voice carrying the same quiet determination that had impressed the Kethmori warriors months earlier. "I'll take the case. But I want both of you to understand something clearly. I'm going to review the evidence objectively and make my ruling based solely on the legal and moral merits of each claim. If that means ruling against human interests, so be it. If it means ruling against Kethmori interests, so be it." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "My grandfather used to say that a man's word was the only thing that truly belonged to him. Well, my word is that I will serve justice first, species loyalty second. I hope both our civilizations can live with that." Admiral Fakes' projection flickered slightly as he transmitted the conversation to his superiors. When the image stabilized, his expression carried what Marcus had learned to recognize as deep satisfaction. "Chief Arbitrator Chun," the Admiral said formally, "the Kethmori Empire places this matter in your hands with complete confidence in your integrity." Ambassador Zura moved to stand beside Marcus, placing one of her hands on his shoulder in a gesture of support that transcended species boundaries. "And the Vorthan Collective will stand by whatever ruling you make, knowing that it comes from someone who has already proven that he values principles above personal safety." As the three of them stood together in the observation deck, watching the greatest gathering of species in galactic history prepare for formal negotiations, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But along with that weight came a familiar sense of purpose, the same feeling he had experienced when he chose to remain in Queen Zara's throne room. He was being asked to keep a promise again, but this time the promise was to something larger than any individual being. This time, he was being asked to promise that justice would be served, regardless of the cost to himself or his species. And, just like before, Marcus knew that he would keep that promise, no matter where it led. The arbitration chamber aboard Concordia Prime was designed to accommodate the physiological needs of dozens of different species while maintaining an atmosphere of solemn neutrality. Marcus sat at the center of a circular amphitheater, elevated on a platform that gave him clear sight lines to all participants. To his left sat the human delegation, including representatives from Earth's government and the Colonial Authority. To his right sat the Kethmori delegation, their imposing forms made even more intimidating by the formal battle armor that served as their diplomatic dress. Behind and above him, in tiered seating that ringed the chamber, sat observers from 35 other species. This case would set precedents that would affect interspecies relations for decades to come, and every major civilization had sent representatives to witness the proceedings. Marcus wore the formal robes of a chief arbitrator, simple gray garments that bore no species-specific ornamentation. On the desk before him lay the complete case files from both sides, thousands of pages of legal documents, exploration records, and competing claims that he had spent the past 3 weeks studying with obsessive thoroughness. The arbitration session regarding the Kepler 442 territorial dispute is now in session, Marcus announced, his voice carried throughout the chamber by translation systems that rendered his words in dozens of different languages simultaneously. Both parties have submitted their evidence and arguments. Today we will hear final statements before I render my decision. Ambassador Rebecca Martinez, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, rose to address the chamber. Her voice was steady and confident as she presented the human position. Chief Arbitrator Chun, the evidence clearly shows that human exploration probes reached the Kepler 442 system first, mapping its resources and establishing preliminary territorial claims under the established protocols of the Galactic Exploration Compact. The Human Colonial Authority filed proper documentation of these claims with the appropriate galactic registries months before any Kethmori vessels appeared in the system. She activated a holographic display that showed probe trajectories and timestamps. These automated probes established legitimate prior claim to the system's resources. The subsequent arrival of human colonization ships was simply the natural follow-up to this legally established exploration priority. Marcus listened carefully, taking notes on a tablet designed for multi-species compatibility. Ambassador Martinez's presentation was thorough and professionally delivered, but he could see the expectation in her eyes, the assumption that he would naturally favor his own species' claims. "Thank you, Ambassador Martinez," Marcus said when she finished. "War Chief Kronak, please present the Kethmori position." The scarred warrior rose from his seat with the fluid grace that characterized Kethmori movement despite their massive size. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command in life-or-death situations. Chief Arbitrator Chun, while humans may have sent unmanned probes to survey the system, the Kethmori were first to establish permanent infrastructure and begin actual resource extraction. Under the settlement priority provisions of the same Galactic Exploration Compact, active colonization takes precedence over mere survey data. Kronak's holographic display showed massive Kethmori mining platforms and orbital habitats that have been constructed around the disputed planet. Our people have invested enormous resources in developing this system. Kethmori families have established homes on the orbital stations. Kethmori workers have begun extracting the rare minerals essential to our technological infrastructure. He paused, his mechanical eye focusing directly on Marcus. Most importantly, Chief Arbitrator, forcing our people to abandon this system would constitute a violation of the settlement rights doctrine that has governed galactic expansion for over a century. Marcus nodded respectfully as War Chief Kronak concluded his presentation. The Kethmori argument was equally compelling from a legal standpoint, and the competing interpretations of galactic law created a genuine dilemma with no clear resolution. "Thank you, War Chief Kronak," Marcus said. "Before I render my decision, I want to address the broader implications of this case for all parties involved." He stood, his movement causing a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the chamber as hundreds of beings focused their attention on the human arbitrator whose decision would establish precedents for decades to come. Both sides have presented compelling legal arguments based on different interpretations of established galactic law. Marcus began. The humans correctly cite exploration priority provisions, while the Kethmori correctly invoke settlement rights doctrine. In a purely legal sense, both claims have merit. A murmur ran through the observer galleries as representatives from various species exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of complex situation that had led to wars in the past. However, Marcus continued, "My role as arbitrator requires me to look beyond competing legal interpretations to find a solution that serves justice and promotes long-term stability between our civilizations." Ambassador Martinez shifted in her seat, her expression growing concerned as she sensed that Marcus's decision might not favor human interests as she expected. After careful consideration of all evidence and arguments, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly throughout the chamber, "I find that both parties acted in good faith according to their understanding of galactic law. Neither side deliberately violated established protocols or attempted to deceive the other." He paused, knowing that his next words would reshape the landscape of interspecies relations. "Therefore, my ruling is as follows. The Kepler 442 system will be designated as the first official joint development zone under a new framework for shared resource extraction and colonization." The reaction in the chamber was immediate and intense. Human delegates began talking urgently among themselves while Kethmori representatives exchanged clicking sounds that indicated surprise and consultation. The observer galleries erupted in translated conversations as species representatives tried to process the implications of this unprecedented decision. Marcus raised his hand for silence, and gradually the chamber quieted enough for him to continue. "The specific terms of this joint development zone are as follows. Human and Kethmori operations will continue in their current locations, but all future development will be coordinated through a joint oversight committee with equal representation from both species. Resource extraction quotas will be established based on actual need rather than territorial claims, with surplus production shared according to a formula that accounts for both exploration priority and settlement investment." Ambassador Martinez stood abruptly. "Chief Arbitrator, with all due respect, this ruling essentially rewards Kethmori territorial aggression while penalizing human adherence to proper exploration protocols." War Chief Kronak also rose, his cybernetic implants whirring softly. "Chief Arbitrator Chun, the Kethmori Empire did not agree to arbitration in order to surrender half of our legitimately settled territory to human control." Marcus looked at both representatives calmly, having anticipated exactly these objections. "Ambassador Martinez, War Chief Kronak, please allow me to explain the reasoning behind this decision." He activated his own holographic display, showing detailed analyses of resource flows, population distributions, and development potential throughout the disputed system. The Kepler 442 system contains enough rare mineral resources to supply both civilizations for several centuries, Marcus explained. Fighting over exclusive control would likely result in a war that would cost both sides far more than the total value of the disputed resources. The display shifted to show economic projections and casualty estimates for various conflict scenarios. More importantly, this case represents an opportunity to establish a new model for interspecies cooperation that could prevent similar disputes in the future. By creating the first joint development zone, we demonstrate that territorial conflicts can be resolved through shared benefit rather than winner-take-all competition. Ambassador Zura, who had been observing silently from the gallery, requested permission to speak. Marcus recognized her immediately and nodded his approval. Chief Arbitrator Chun, she said, rising gracefully from her seat. As an observer representing species that have frequently been caught in the middle of territorial disputes between larger powers, I want to commend this decision. The Joint Development Zone concept could provide a framework for resolving dozens of similar conflicts throughout the galaxy. Her words seemed to resonate with many of the observers, as representatives from smaller species began nodding approvingly. But Marcus could see that neither the human nor Keth Mori delegations were entirely satisfied with his ruling. Ambassador Martinez, War Chief Kronak, Marcus said, addressing them directly, I understand that this decision requires both of your civilizations to accept less than they had hoped for. But I believe it offers both sides something more valuable than exclusive control of a single star system. He gestured toward the observer galleries, where representatives from dozens of species watched intently. This ruling establishes humans and Keth Mori as the first civilizations willing to choose cooperation over conquest. That reputation for reasonableness and diplomatic flexibility will serve both your peoples well in future negotiations throughout the galaxy. Marcus paused, then continued with the quiet conviction that had become his signature. Ambassador Martinez, the human government wanted me to establish that humans could compete successfully with larger, more established species for territorial claims. This ruling demonstrates something far more impressive. The humans can sacrifice immediate gains for long-term stability and justice. He turned to address War Chief Kronak. War Chief, the Keth Mori Empire wanted this arbitration to validate your people's right to expand through strength and determination. This ruling shows that Keth Mori are sophisticated enough to embrace partnership over domination, which makes you far more formidable diplomatically than military conquest ever could. A long silence followed as both delegations considered the implications of Marcus's words. Finally, Ambassador Martinez spoke, her voice thoughtful rather than angry. Chief Arbitrator, are you saying that accepting this joint development model would actually strengthen our respective positions in future negotiations? Yes, Marcus replied without hesitation. A human government willing to share valuable resources demonstrates confidence and magnanimity. A Keth Mori empire willing to cooperate rather than conquer demonstrates wisdom and strategic thinking. Both qualities make for stronger negotiating positions than simple territorial acquisition. War Chief Kronak's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed this perspective. Chief Arbitrator Chun, you are suggesting that perceived reasonableness is itself a form of power. I'm suggesting that the galaxy is watching to see how mature civilizations resolve their differences, Marcus said. Species that choose cooperation over conflict will find themselves trusted with larger responsibilities and more valuable opportunities. Admiral Fakes' holographic projection materialized beside War Chief Kronak, indicating that the Keth Mori leadership had been following the proceedings remotely. Chief Arbitrator Chun, Admiral Fakes said formally, the Keth Mori High Command has been monitoring these proceedings. While we are not entirely satisfied with the territorial arrangements, we recognize the strategic wisdom of your approach. He paused, his mechanical features reflecting the chamber's lighting. The Keth Mori Empire accepts your ruling and agrees to participate in the Joint Development Zone framework. All eyes turned to Ambassador Martinez as she consulted quietly with her delegation. After several minutes of hushed conversation, she rose to address the chamber. The Human Colonial Authority also accepts Chief Arbitrator Chen's ruling, she announced. We look forward to working with our Kethmori partners in developing this new model for interspecies cooperation. The observer galleries erupted in what could only be described as celebration, with representatives from dozens of species expressing approval through their various cultural mechanisms. Some applauded, others clicked or whistled, and a few emitted harmonious tones that filled the chamber with an almost musical quality. Marcus felt a familiar sense of satisfaction wash over him, the same feeling he had experienced in Queen Zura's throne room when he knew he had kept his word. But this time, the promise he had kept was larger than any personal commitment. This time, he had kept faith with the idea that justice and fairness could triumph over narrow self-interest. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Ambassador Zara approached the arbitrator's platform. "Marcus," she said quietly, using his first name in recognition of their shared history, "do you realize what you have accomplished here today?" Marcus looked around the chamber, watching as human and Kethmori delegates began discussing practical implementation details with a cooperation that would have been impossible just hours earlier. "I kept my promise to be fair," he said simply. "Everything else is just details." Ambassador Zura's multifaceted eyes reflected something that might have been tears if her species had possessed tear ducts. "No, Marcus. Today you proved that humans can indeed serve as neutral arbitrators in galactic affairs. You chose justice over loyalty to your own species, and in doing so, you may have changed the course of galactic civilization." War Chief Kronak approached the platform as well, his massive form moving with respectful purpose. "Chief Arbitrator Chun, 6 months ago in a Vorthan throne room, you taught the Kethmori about the strength that comes from keeping one's word. Today you have taught the entire galaxy about the wisdom that comes from placing justice above personal interest." Marcus looked at these two beings who had become unlikely allies through shared respect for human principles. "War Chief, Ambassador, I think you're both giving me too much credit. I just tried to find a solution that was fair to everyone involved. And that," said a new voice from behind them, "is exactly what makes humanity so valuable to galactic civilization." They turned to see Captain Sarah Winters approaching, her uniform bearing new insignia that indicated promotion to Deputy Chief Arbitrator. "Sarah," Marcus said, genuinely surprised, "I didn't realize you were observing the session." "I wouldn't have missed it," she replied. "Marcus, the Galactic Council has been watching these proceedings very carefully. Based on your handling of this case, they've asked me to inform you that 17 other territorial disputes have been submitted for human arbitration." Marcus felt his knees go weak at the implications. 17 more cases like this one. Some even more complex, Captain Winters confirmed. But the Council believes that humans have demonstrated the perfect combination of fairness and resolve needed to handle difficult arbitration cases. Ambassador Zara moved to stand beside Marcus, offering physical support as he processed this news. "Marcus, you should feel honored. The galaxy has decided to trust your species with maintaining peace and justice among the stars." War Chief Kronak nodded approvingly. "It is fitting. Humans have shown that they will die for their principles and sacrifice for justice. These qualities make excellent arbitrators." Marcus looked around at his companions. A Vorthan queen who had become an ambassador, a Kethmori warrior who had become a philosopher, and a human captain who had become his partner in an unprecedented experiment in galactic peacekeeping. "You know," he said finally, managing a tired smile, "6 months ago, I was just trying to protect one alien queen because I had given my word. I never imagined it would lead to this." "That," Captain Winters said, echoing the words that had become something of a motto among the arbitration corps, "is exactly what makes it so extraordinary." As they stood together in the empty chamber, watching the stars will slowly pass the great viewport, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had led him from a simple military assignment to the center of galactic diplomacy. He thought about his grandfather's words about keeping promises and wondered what the old farmer would think about his grandson's role in reshaping interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. But mostly Marcus thought about the future, about the 17 new cases waiting for arbitration, about the dozens of species learning to trust human judgment, and about the possibility that his simple refusal to break his word might actually help create a more just and peaceful galaxy. It was, he decided, exactly the kind of promise worth keeping. In the months and years that followed, the Kepler 442 Joint Development Zone would become a model for interspecies cooperation, copied throughout the galaxy wherever territorial disputes threatened to escalate into warfare. Human arbitrators would become the gold standard for neutral mediation, trusted by species that had been enemies for centuries to find fair solutions to seemingly impossible conflicts. And historians would look back